Hey guys, recently I have been training Dungeoneering a lot, and I've learned a lot about the skill and how best to train it. I know a lot of players dislike Dungeoneering and opt to use either their XP lamps on the skill, or they train it through methods like Elite Dungeons or even the Dungeoneering hole in the summer. But Dungeoneering can actually be fun, and it is a fast skill to train once you understand it. In this Dungeoneering tips and tricks guide, I'm going to be going through some of the basics of Dungeoneering, but also give you some tips that I wish I knew when I was first training the skill. There will be timestamps in the description for each section, so I hope you enjoy. First, let's start with the basics. Dungeoneering is a really unique skill in RuneScape. It was the first 120 skill ever added to the game, and you can earn XP through a few different methods, as mentioned, like Elite Dungeons and the Dungeoneering hole. The best XP per hour you can expect from these two methods is 200,000 XP per hour from Elite Dungeons, especially if you are cashing in your Dungeoneering tokens for XP. And with the Dungeoneering hole, it's around 120k XP per hour. It is okay to have an alternative method of training Dungeoneering, but the main way to train the skill is through Daemonheim. Training Dungeoneering through Daemonheim is by far the best method. If you're training the skill with a really good group and are taking full advantage of the Dungeoneering cards, which I will go over, you can get up to 4 million XP per hour, maybe even a bit more. Now, this does scale with how fast you can do the dungeon, but you could at least get around 600k XP per hour fairly easily without the use of any cards and without a pretty good team. So Dungeoneering through the traditional way is actually a pretty fast skill because it's not actually that difficult to get XP rates upwards of 2, 3, maybe even the 4 mil per hour. Now, as for the very basics on Dungeoneering, I think this is important to go over because honestly, myself, when I was 109 Dungeoneering and starting to train the skill again, I didn't fully know this. But basically the way it works is you want to go through each floor up to your maximum. And so at level 120 Dungeoneering, for example, you can reach the maximum floor of 60. And once you complete all of those floors, so all 60, you can then reset. Now, if, for example, I only made it from floor 1 to 30, or even if I did floor 30 to 60, and then reset, my prestige is only floor 30, because I only completed 30 floors. So as you can see in this example, you can see my previous progress is 58. That means that I completed 58 floors. But current progress is only 55. So what this means is previously I completed 58 floors, then I reset. But currently I'm missing 3 floors. As you can see, I'm missing floor 37, 38, and 39. So it doesn't even have to be the last floors that you unlocked. If you don't complete floor 1, 2, and 3, you're going to be missing out on XP during your next prestige after you reset your floors. So that's why you always want to complete every floor you possibly can before you reset. And if you are a high enough Dungeoneering level, it can sometimes make sense to skip floors with Dungeoneering tokens. As you guys can see, it costs 20,302 Dungeoneering tokens to skip floor 37. And you could do this by talking to the rewards trader at Daemonheim. You can just click shop and then go to the skip floors tab. And then you can pick what floors to skip. You can see the earlier floors, it's a lot cheaper to skip. Whereas floor 37, 38, 39, it becomes more expensive and so on and so forth. It's just a bit more expensive the higher the floor. Now, traditionally, when you are training Dungeoneering, you never want to skip floor 35 and higher. That's when you want to start doing the large dungeons and earn better XP. And so I just got this table off of the wiki for the Dungeoneering guide. It's usually what I follow, but you can see based on your Dungeoneering level, you'll want to either do some small dungeons, you'll maybe want to rush or skip some, and then do large dungeons for the floors that are the highest, because that's when you're going to be getting the most XP. So for example, at 95 or higher Dungeoneering, you'll want to rush or even skip with the Dungeoneering tokens floors 1 to 35, and then you'll want to do large floors from there on out for the best XP. Another thing that I should quickly mention about the Dungeoneering menus is that you'll want to always have complexity at 6 for the best XP per hour. And then also with guide mode, you'll want to have this ticked off. By having guide mode ticked on will give you reduced XP within the dungeon because you're actually getting guided around. And with complexity lower than 6, again, you'll get a penalty. You'll get less XP. So that's why you want it at level 6. This next tip is probably one of the biggest tips I can give and something that I just learned at 117 Dungeoneering, and it's the Gorajo cards. I didn't know you could just buy them with Dungeoneering tokens, but if you go to the shop, you can see you can buy team cards and also solo cards, and they only cost 15 and 5k Dungeoneering tokens each. There are a few cards that are really helpful, but the two main ones is the Thieving Locust and the Preening Ibis card. Both of these stack. The Preening Ibis gives you 1.5 times XP, whereas the Thieving Locust gives you double the XP and double the token. So it is really awesome to get both of these Gorajo cards active at the same time. As I mentioned, you can get the team card and the solo card. The team card has these buffs active for the entire team, whereas the solo card is just yourself, and of course it's a lot cheaper. If you are going for the best XP rates for Dungeoneering, you will need these cards. They are essential to getting the 4 million XP per hour that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. The cards aren't really that expensive, especially when you're a higher Dungeoneering level. I probably wouldn't recommend getting these cards when you are a fairly low Dungeoneering level, but definitely keep them in mind for once you are over level 100 Dungeoneering and have access to some pretty high floors, because these are going to give you some really fast Dungeoneering XP per hour. They also work on double XP, so you can just imagine how fast this skill can actually be. There are a variety of other Gorajo Dungeoneering cards, some of them pretty useful as well, including the Smoke Devil card, which allows you to open skill doors without meeting the level requirements. The Cloning Mosquito gives you double tokens, and there are also a few other interesting cards, like the Whimsical Bunyip card, which offers an effect of a random card. Now, I do also want to mention that aside from purchasing these from the Dungeoneering shop, you can also get them from the Gorajo Horde Stalker in the Prifddinas Resource Dungeon. He won't give you a card if you already have one, so do keep that in mind, and you will require level 95 Dungeoneering to enter. Another tip is that you can customize your Ring of Kinship in Daemonheim. So when you are in a floor or dungeon, you can actually customize it and gain extra DPS buffs depending on what combat style you want to use. For example, if you are using melee, you may want the Tactician buff, which increases the chance of hitting with one-handed melee weapons. If you are planning on using two-handed weapons, you might want the Berserk ability, and there's also a bunch of abilities for ranged, magic, and skiller abilities. So they are really helpful, especially when you have some pretty low gear in Daemonheim and your hit chance is quite low. This ring is actually essential for increasing that hit chance. At tier 10, you will be increasing your hit chance by 20%, which is pretty drastic and will help a ton. It is a bit expensive to upgrade this ring all the way to tier 10, but some of the early upgrades are fairly cheap, so I definitely recommend you check some of them out. One reward that you can go for within Daemonheim is the Daemonheim Aura. To get this aura, you will need to complete the Daemonheim achievements. You will get a different tier of aura based on what tier of achievements you have completed, with the Daemonheim Elite achievements needed for the Daemonheim Aura 4, which gives you access to a second Gatestone, which is extremely helpful for high-level Dungeoneering. This aura is something to work towards as you are leveling up Dungeoneering. It does give a lot of really helpful benefits, including adding a secondary role for the Ring of Kinship. The Tier 2 aura gives some really helpful bonuses, including the Smuggler giving you 40 Law and Cosmic Runes every dungeon, which means you can teleport around much easier and don't have to make them every run. You'll also get a new bind slot for potions. The tier 3 aura gives you 2 more bind pool slots, which is extremely helpful. And as I mentioned, the tier 4 aura giving access to a second Gatestone is just extremely helpful, especially if you want to be pretty serious with the skill and are going for something like 120 or 200 mil XP. Now let's get into some different items that will help you with Dungeoneering, starting with the Deathless Relic. This relic can be obtained at level 91 Archaeology, and harnessing this relic's power will cause players to never have a penalty for dying in Dungeoneering. Normally, when you are doing a dungeon in Daemonheim, if you die, you get a 10% penalty, but if you have this relic active, then you won't get that penalty for dying anymore. It is only useful if you are someone who dies regularly in Daemonheim. You might die every now and again, so it doesn't really hurt to have this relic active if you are training it for long periods of time. The Shadow's Grace relic is also another really helpful relic within Daemonheim. It reduces the cooldown of Surge and Dive by 50%, which usually you're using quite a bit to get through the dungeon as fast as possible. It requires level 67 Archaeology to obtain, so it's not too bad of a requirement, and it definitely will help speed up the dungeoneering times a little bit. The Persistent Rage relic is also another great relic to have. It allows players to generate adrenaline when outside of combat at a rate of 5% every 1.2 seconds, meaning if you aren't in combat in Daemonheim, basically you'll just be gaining adrenaline and you'll be able to deal a lot more DPS that way, since you'll basically be at pretty high adrenaline at all times. It does require level 98 Archaeology, but it's a great relic to use. The Infernal Puzzle Box is just a general great PVM upgrade, but after the quest, the session, you can add this to your tool belt and your adrenaline will no longer drain outside of combat, so it is a good alternative to the Persistent Rage relic and really helpful in Daemonheim. Next up, we have one of the most useful items, the Dungeoneering Lock Melter. This can be unlocked at level 70 Invention with the Dwarven Technology Tree, so you will require some quests to be completed, including the Giant Dwarf quest. They are also quite cheap to make, the most expensive component being ethereal components, but overall the total cost is around 250k in terms of invention components. It is an extremely helpful item. It can open any non-key dungeoneering door. This includes puzzle or skill doors. It can even be used on guardian doors. So it basically just speeds up your dungeoneering run every time, making it a really awesome item to have. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you can only use one per dungeon or one per floor. So that is something to keep in mind, but still, it is a really awesome item and something that you'll want to use every run to make your floors as fast as possible and, of course, increase your XP per hour. You'll also want to try to start obtaining the Dungeoneering outfit. You can start obtaining Dungeoneering fragments at level 80 Dungeoneering, and then you can start creating these outfits at an inventor's workbench. Alternatively, they are purchased from double XP tokens. So if you are a main account and training on double XP, you'll get these tokens passively, and you can buy this outfit from that as well. There are 4 different sets of Dungeoneering outfits, all providing the same boost, which is plus 5% experience boost to all skills in Dungeoneering. You also get 5% extra base experience for the floor and also increases your tokens earned by 5%, plus some additional boosts as well. Once you have all 4 outfits obtained, you can combine them into the Warped Trailblazer outfit. This outfit is far superior as it provides a 7% bonus to Dungeoneering and skills trained within Daemonheim. Also, you get a 7% token discount at the Dungeoneering rewards shop, which is really awesome, especially if you're planning on stocking up on a ton of those Gorajo cards, which I mentioned earlier. This outfit also has one extremely powerful buff, similar to the Lock Melter. It can open any non-key door once per dungeon. So if you have a group of 5, you can have one person unlock any puzzle door, for example, with the Gorajo outfit. Then you can also have another puzzle door opened with the Lock Melter. So it really does speed up your dungeons and, of course, increases your XP per hour. Next up, we have various potions which are extremely helpful, first being the Perfect Juju Dungeoneering Potion. It can be purchased on the Grand Exchange, and it lasts 4 hours, providing a plus 5% damage boost, and also a 25% extra chance at journal pages, which might be helpful if you're going for some tasks or whatnot. But overall, this is something you must have. The 5% extra damage is really helpful, the potion is quite cheap, and will last you 4 hours. The Perfect Juju Herbler Potion can also be a bit of a niche use if you are looking for the combination potion recipes within Daemonheim, which can then be purchased at Prifness. This is a good potion to use, gives you 10% higher chance at finding these recipes, and it is really helpful, especially if you're going for that comp cape requirement. Finally, if you're going for speed kills, some people like to drink an overload right before they go in. It only lasts the 6 minutes, but Dungeoneering clears can be quite fast if you have a pretty good team, and of course it will speed up your damage within Daemonheim, so this is also another pretty good thing to use if you are trying to go for the best XP per hour. Another tip that I have for you guys is if you are already level 99 Dungeoneering, you will be able to actually have the Dungeoneering Cape, and you can wear that within Daemonheim. It does give you a few extra damage bonus, which is pretty nice. So I definitely recommend doing that. So as you can see, if I just form a party, let's just do floor 1 or hop in, you can see that I can just enter with the Dungeoneering Cape and it won't make me take it off. So this is really helpful for providing a little bit extra damage within Daemonheim. Now, I'm not going to go through everything within Daemonheim and the actual floors, but I do just want to give a few tips. The first thing that I like to do, I don't actually have the Daemonheim Aura 2, but if you did, you would already have some Law Runes and also some Cosmic Runes. If you don't have the Daemonheim Aura 2, I recommend just going and buying some Rune Essence, and then you can just go to the altar and craft some Law Runes and some Cosmic Runes. The reason why you want a bit of both is the Cosmic Runes, they're really great for teleporting to the group Gatestone. So the party leader always has a group Gatestone. They can drop it down on any room, and with these Law Runes, I can teleport wherever the group Gatestone is within Daemonheim. The Cosmic Runes, they're really helpful because you can create a personal Gatestone. So this is one that only you can teleport to. It costs 3 Cosmic Runes to make. If I drop it wherever I want, then I have this personal Gatestone teleport. It doesn't cost any more runes. When I click it, I teleport to my personal Gatestone. It also does destroy it, so if you want to place another one, you'll have to make one and drop it again. But it's just a way of having multiple different Gatestones that you can teleport around the dungeon a lot faster, and it's really helpful when you have a group. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you have the Daemonheim Aura 4, you will be able to have a Gatestone 2, a group Gatestone 2, which also just helps further improve this. You will be able to place it down and teleport it just with the aura. So that is something really helpful that you'll want to try and get. And finally, the last tip I want to give you guys is to make sure you have a bind setup. This is something that you will definitely want to have at some point when you are training Dungeoneering. You can have 3 different setups. It is probably best to have either ranged or magic, just because you can clear the dungeons a bit faster that way, and you have the ranged when you're actually fighting the creatures. But you can bind certain equipment and have them in your bound item slots. You get more slots the further you level up Dungeoneering, and you also get some slots with the tasks completed. And you can see that you can just drag them in and out and customize different slots. And so you can also see there is a check mark beside the slot that you are taking. So the check mark basically means that is going to be the bound items that you start with when you start the Daemonheim run. So right now I start with my chaps and my bow, whereas I could click this arrow and I would have started with my melee setup instead. You can just click the take button within Daemonheim just to switch up your style every time, or your bound item setup. So it isn't too difficult to change that, but it is just a nice tip so you can start off with some pretty good gear. So if I was going to bind this Ecto Robe, all I would need to do is right click and click bind. Now right now I have too many bound items in my setup here, so I would have to remove one, which all I would need to do is just drag it to the garbage box there, and then you can just add more and mix and match. It is best to have one combat style full, so probably if I was smart, I would get rid of maybe some of this melee gear and try and max out my ranged gear instead, but ultimately it's up to you. It is just a nice way so you can get some pretty decent gear that you can basically do Dungeoneering with every time. And so anyway guys, those are all my tips and tricks for this video. I really hope you found some of them helpful. Honestly, I learned a lot of them very recently when I was training Dungeoneering from 109 to 117 during double XP. And it is actually a skill that isn't that bad. Normally, I would have been with everyone who is just lamping this skill or maybe training passively through elite dungeons. But honestly, Dungeoneering, it's really not that bad when you do understand the skill, when you understand how to get the XP a lot faster, because it is actually one of the faster skills to train in RuneScape 3. And I think everyone agrees just gaining a lot of XP and leveling up fast, it's kind of fun. So I do think you might find Dungeoneering enjoyable if you did try it and actually give it a chance. And so I hope you found some of these tips helpful. If you did, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more RuneScape 3 content. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.